G'day, AJ Mahara here. Borderline personality disorder, for those who have it, that's one kettle of fish, shall we say. What about the comorbidity between borderline personality and narcissistic personality disorder when that's occurring in one individual, in one person? So people who have BPD comorbid with NPD, now estimated to be somewhere between 37% to 42% of people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, will also be comorbidly narcissistic personality disordered. You know, there's so many different ways this unfolds in people's lives and with individual people who are comorbid BPD, NPD. So there is no really one-size-fits-all way to describe this. And I've talked about it here and there. But I think this won't sound like it makes much sense, but for people who are or have been involved with somebody with BPD, and maybe you know that much, maybe you know they were BPD comorbid NPD, but maybe you don't realize that yet. Maybe you're with someone like that, or maybe you've been with someone like that. And then what happens really is, how can somebody even begin to assess that, right? For yourself. How can you sort of know the difference? Because there is narcissism within borderline personality. There's unhealthy, overcompensatory defense mechanisms that are narcissistic. So what's the difference between those and the narcissistic defenses of the narcissist? Probably intensity and a little bit in terms of the depth of their woundedness in childhood, which is really, I'm not going to talk much about that in this video because it's much more complicated and there's much more needs to be said about that. And probably other people are talking about many aspects of, at least, what creates, not creates, but how the narcissist comes to be a narcissist. But here's one thing I just wanted to impart in this video, if nothing else. One way that you can try to at least, so it's one way that you can start to try to make sense, not sense, but to understand better if you were with or are with somebody who's borderline comorbid with narcissistic personality disorder. Now, this is not a one-size-fits-all, nor when I say this will it mean the same thing for every single person. The depth and level of your pain and of how much of yourself you've lost and of how much longer a process it is to either end these relationships or be ghosted or discarded by the borderline comorbid narcissist, that can take longer too. Why? Because they're hanging on and they're milking you for more supply. They're taking more of your energy. They're future faking better with you. They're telling you it's going to be okay. They're telling you how much that they love you so that you'll try harder. And you'll be like, but I'm really hurting here. And like, can you hear me? Can you see me? And maybe in many different ways you will say that. Or people have communicated that. And that's just fueling the narcissistic personality disorder aspect of the comorbid borderline narcissist. And the future faking and the gaslighting and the on again, off again with the comorbid borderline narcissist is probably more to sort of what happens with a lot of narcissists than what traditionally people think their experience or they've read about online or people share what their experiences is with some experiences have been or are ongoingly, like with people with just BPD. So what I'm saying in this video is really the level to which you are in pain, which, everybody's going to be, I can't say across the board. That means everybody's going to be in pain and then describe that somehow to this extent or that extent, or it's going to mean you're going to be here or feel this. But each person And it's really probably a good indicator for some people maybe to get an idea what's happening beyond borderline personality in somebody that you've been with or are with, or a family member or a parent or whatever the case. But people get really hurt by people with BPD too. So like, not all. Let's have that caveat for sure. But the level, but there is a deeper pain. And I've experienced with clients over the years too. You can see the difference. There is a deeper pain and a longer recovery and healing process when somebody's been with somebody with comorbid BPD, NPD, as opposed to BPD. I didn't want to say just, but BPD. And the other thing too is that these people who are comorbid have less percentage chance of even wanting therapy, although I've worked with many. And then even when they do seek therapy, the experience I've had with like a fair amount of clients, BPD comorbid with NPD, and to varying degrees, and that doesn't mean the same thing across the board for every single person with this comorbidity, but it really impedes the process, because in some ways, and this is the other thing to look for if you're not sure if you're with somebody with BPD or somebody who's BPD, NPD, that there's this fluctuation, there's this, and I think lots of people are getting, educated well intellectually to be able to look at this, but emotionally, it's way harder to understand or grasp or get a hold of for quite a while after these relationships rupture and chaotically so, and very painfully so. But I think there's something to what I'm trying to say here, I hope I'm making some sense, to this idea that, well, what I know is true for people, that they are hurting beyond what you might even, so like if this has happened to you, or you think that you're with somebody with BPD, NPD, if you go and you read on forums or you listen to videos about people with BPD, you might be like, yeah, but there might be a sense that there's more to it than that in your case, in your experience with whoever this person is in your life or was. I would say pay attention to that, because what that is a gut instinct, right? It's an instinct about something that you may or may not be on the path of intellectually like researching or understanding yet, or that you just don't know yet. And that certainly in your emotional landscape, that tremendous upheaval emotionally, that agony that you are in, pain beyond description, really, and for each individual will be felt in their own, in ways that they themselves would be best to describe, not me. These can be some experiences that you can at least start to ask the right questions to come to what a lot of people come to realize is that they are with somebody who's BPD, comorbid, NPD. And so it's about how you're feeling. It's about depth and level of pain. It's about starting to understand a little more about narcissistic personality disorder if you don't. But even when you do that, here's something I would suggest for you. And I got to do many more videos on this, I think. I don't know if other people are doing, I'm sure they're doing them too, and that's great. But here's the thing. A lot of people are talking about narcissists a lot, and that's a good thing. And then a lot of people are talking about BPD, and a lot of people with BPD are not talking about BPD. But that all gets a little confusing, I think, at the best for a lot of people on the other side. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's more my experience working with clients who have comorbid BPD, NPD that informs me on this, and a little bit of my, clinical history, background, education, but also that I had BPD and recovered from it. And no, I never had NPD. I was never diagnosed, though people still like to call me a narc because people online do that, right? But the thing is, and that's meaningless. But the point is, so I never had it, so I don't know what it's like to be comorbid BPD, NPD at all, personally. But I do know from clients, and I do see those struggles, and I do kind of see where, and I had a relationship with somebody in the early 2000s who was a borderline narcissist alcoholic. And maybe I'll do a video talking a little bit more about what I went through there. Although, how could I condense? But I could try to pick out some features and some things that I realized. And again, I can tell you that from my experience, this is after my recovery from BPD. So I'm just like you people out there right now who are on the other side of these people. And I was when I was in that relationship. And I didn't know what was going on. But I will say that one way to tell if you're wondering why you're hurting so much and you feel like you're losing your mind, and you might know they have BPD, or you might have been able to tell that, or in that realm, how can you understand the next part? And I'm not saying you can't intellectually and all that, but how can you really emotionally figure that part out for yourself? It's how much flipping pain you're in. It's when the pain, when you can't, who are with people with BPD can't make sense out of that pain often either, right? Understandably, because these people live in parallel universes. Let me just put it that way. I'm not trying to vilify, but they live in a parallel universe. What they're experiencing, if you have had neither BPD or NPD, and I haven't had NPD, I had BPD and recovered from that, just to be clear, then how could you possibly imagine what's going on inside of them? And I can't possibly imagine what's going on inside of a narcissist. But yeah, my mother's a narcissist, comorbid borderline. My father was a dark triad. Many other relatives had me. So I experienced it on the other side, right? I got really hurt with narcissists and stuff. And so, but the client work that I've been doing for the last 30 years, and I have some clients right now that are BPD, NPD, comorbid, and diagnosed as such, not by moi, but by a psychiatrist. And so, and some of them are doing quite well, and many over the years have done quite well, and some don't do well at all. And the process can be pretty demanding and harrowing. But one thing that process, if I find I'm just really trying to help somebody who isn't making a lot of movement because they're borderline comorbid narcissistic personality disorder, I try to help as much as I can. I think there's places where I help even those who are not going to do well in the process and who are going to abandon the process. But I've learned so much over the years about that presentation, and that's probably what I need to speak more about. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more about that, because it's really hard to... And then when I went through it with the person that I was with back in 2000, I guess it was 3, the end of 2003 into 2004 and through 2005. It was horrific. And it was really something. If you have the adverse childhood experience that leads to codependency, because that's not just it's not a pathology. It too is a response to adverse childhood experience at a different level than, say, BPD or NPD. So with that, if you relate to being codependent, etc., and that was definitely part of what I've been through, and probably to a much less degree I still deal with once in a while. Because I think what I'm trying to say is, with codependency and with adverse childhood experience in your own history, whether you're really on that page with it or aware of it or not, when you get with somebody with BPD, that's going to be one experience, and that's going to be pretty painful. When you get with somebody who's BPD, comorbid, NPD, that's going to put you on your knees at some point, maybe not literally physically, but it's going to trigger in you, for lack of a better way to put it, some primal level of pain that you won't understand necessarily what's happening to me. And that's what a lot of clients report to me. They don't understand why they're hurting so badly. And then, they unravel the experience, and then we explore that. And that's why family of origin work is so important in these processes for people who've been really hurt by somebody with BPD or NPD or comorbid BPD, NPD, because that's a whole... I'm not trying to minimize anybody's pain. If you've been with somebody with BPD, or you're still with somebody and you don't think it's going to work out, but you're still trying, But when you're with somebody with BPD comorbid with NPD, it's going to be an even worse situation. It's going to create more pain in you. You're going to experience much more woundedness. And the more that people give, especially with codependency, or if you're empathic, right? If you're an empath, the more people give to the borderline comorbid narcissist, never mind the borderline, the more it's going to feel like your soul and your whole beingness is literally being sucked right out of you. For lack of a better way to describe the level of pain, the primal level of pain that it will take you to, even if there isn't something in your history that you had to get over or that you may still need to work on from your childhood. It just takes people back to a primal level because of agony, because there isn't any other way to kind of understand it until you really work through a process of healing and also going no contact and protecting yourself and taking care of yourself in those first steps and stages that are really difficult. And especially if you're not sure, if you're dealing with somebody who's comorbid BPD, NPD. So maybe, I don't know, let me know in the comments if you want to hear more about this from me, if you'd have any interest, because maybe I can elucidate more about this in terms of what you might be experiencing if I reference some of my experience from a relationship with a borderline narcissist alcoholic. And the other thing I just want to say quickly too, in terms of just borderline personality as well, but in this comorbid picture, substance abuse and addiction tends to be even higher percentage and than in BPD alone. I don't know about narcissism alone or narcissistic personality disorder alone, because I'm not really thinking of that right now. I'm thinking of how they present together, and not so much when I'm working with people clinically, what does that look like, but how does that happen in people's lives? Because it doesn't unfold all the same, right? Because when you're working with clients, you're there for the client. You're not, your own emotional landscape is not part of the interaction or equation, and therefore, like, which is very different in human relationships, obviously, right? So I don't want to go on too long here, and I just wanted to say that there's much more, there's an increasing amount of narcissism within borderline personality. Of course, we're living in a more narcissistic culture, but I'm still looking into how to explain that best. And so there's more narcissism and more narcissistic defenses in borderline personality. There's always been narcissism in borderline personality, unhealthy, maladaptive, narcissistic defenses. And then there are narcissistic traits, and then there's what is narcissistic personality and what is that narcissist. So all cluster B personality disorders, because histrionic isn't really included anymore in the DSM definition of what this means, have narcissism, levels of unhealthy narcissism within them, but they're not all the same. So I think it's really important to make that sort of clear as mud statement for now. But I think too that so it's hard for people to measure their own devastation when being with somebody with BPD can be pretty darn devastating all by itself, let alone, and being ghosted or discarded by them, let alone the comorbid BPD, NPD. So they tend to elongate relationships. They tend to come back in cyclical ways to the Hoovers will be really strong. The gaslighting will be really present. The future faking will be really present, which is all the narcissistic personality disorder presentation of things comorbid with the person with BPD. And you will see sometimes many people who are comorbid with BPD, NPD, you will sometimes really see that more, for lack of a better way to put it, the borderline aspect of them. You might see the neediness and the learned helplessness and all of that I can love you stuff. And then in the narcissistic personality disorder presentation of the aspect of that person who's comorbid with the two, you're going to see just this cold, hard shutdown, just this like blank stare, just this like, who the hell are you anyways again? And it's going to go back and forth. And I went through this with that ex of mine now, many years ago, who, like, I tried to rescue her, Yeah, I did. Way back then. I'm kind of out of all that now. And I have no energy for it anymore. I can't do it even if I want to, or would want to, but I don't want to. But so in my trying to rescue that partner that I have with BPD, comorbid NPD, and an alcoholic, I remember having some really of those long circular conversations with her. And I remember how I sort of got to, and I wasn't quite aware what was happening at that time. I had some suspicions, but I would sort of get to a place where she was really feeling some things and sort of getting what I was trying to point out or give feedback or talk about. And then all of a sudden, boom, it would all be gone. And that's the comorbid BPD NPD. That it's not like you see both presentations all the time together. They very much are in flux. And there's a lot of really difficult to explain or complicated to put across. I got to try to condense it. I'm not saying you're not smart enough to understand it, but to just explain what all that really means. But anyway, that's me just talking a little bit more about BPD, NPD comorbidity. And if you think that you're dealing with that, or you've wondered if you're dealing with that, this isn't going to be the ultimate video to decide that for you. But check your levels of pain. Are you in primal pain? Are you losing yourself to the point where you're not really functioning like you used to? Maybe you're having a hard time going to work. Maybe you're having a hard time getting out of bed. And if you're still around this person, you're just going to continually be more and more exhausted, more and more depleted. And this is really exponentially at a higher level even than people going through this with somebody with BPD. And I'm not trying to say that's low level at all. Anyways, I hope I haven't spoken on this topic for a while. I hope that is a little bit helpful and maybe some food for thought and something you can kind of check in with yourself about how you're feeling and how you're being affected by this person, or were affected by someone, and were they BPD, NPD. And it isn't so necessary always that if you don't know what they're diagnosed with, there are ways, at least when I work with people, family of origin healing, self-differentiation, inner child healing work, and what happened in the relationship, there are ways to discern really what was really going on with that person, that we don't really have to look at the labels. And BPD, NPD comorbidity, we don't have to be limited to the labels if in fact we don't know for sure, or you don't know for sure, or clients working with me don't know for sure if that's what would really fit. But we can certainly look at what all that means and decipher that in that sort of framework, if you will. So I hope that was somewhat helpful. I talked a little bit longer than I wanted to, again, because I guess that's easy for me to do. And since I just happen to be in what I'm in right now, elevation. And I like this lone wolf. Not that I'm totally a lone wolf. But the point is, we need to find peace. You're not going to find it with a person with BPD. You're not going to find it with a comorbid borderline narcissist. But you need to elevate yourself today. Get into some elevation in your own soul, in your own spirit. Listen to your gut instincts today, perhaps in a way that you haven't yet ever done before. Because it's not so much that you need to have this, that, or the other thing proven to you. You need to look to what you're feeling. You need to look to your own experience. Your gut instincts are going to help you a lot before you're going to understand. Then you can understand more intellectually. And then it's about understanding more emotionally in the places where you're so devastated. And if you've been with somebody, or you are with somebody who's comorbidly BPD, NPD, you are likely in something that is primal pain. And that's just a deeper level of agony than if I can put it this way, I'm sorry, I don't mean to minimize, the average kind of agony when you've been with somebody with BPD or hurt by somebody with BPD. The BPD, NPD comorbid situation is so much more dangerous on every level, psychologically, physically, spiritually, and it really, people really lose themselves to these people. So let me know in the comments below what you think, if you want to hear more, with more specifics from me, and also if I shared anything to do with the ex from years ago that was borderline narcissist alcoholic, and maybe I could pick out some some things there. Because, yeah, I haven't forgotten it. Took 2 years to recover from it. And I was gaslit up the wazoo for about the first year of that relationship. And I put it that way because it was more like a war game or something, but it was like a torture chamber for me. So take care of yourselves as always.